I ruined a $50 million corporate merger on my wedding night. I did not scream. I did not throw a single glass. I just picked up a microphone and told the truth. My mother-in-law thought she could hide my blue-collar parents next to the kitchen garbage out of sight from her billionaire investors. She thought I would stay quiet and smile for the cameras to protect her family reputation. She forgot one crucial detail. You do not corner a woman who has nothing left to lose. By sunrise the next morning, her empire was in ashes. My husband saw his massive inheritance vanish into thin air, and I walked away in my custom silk gown without a single regret. This is not a story about a ruined wedding. This is a story about a flawless execution. I am Maya. I am 29 years old. I grew up in a house where the winter wind howled through the window cracks. My father was an auto mechanic who worked 14-hour shifts. His hands were permanently stained with dark engine grease, but those hands built my entire future. My mother cleaned houses in the wealthiest neighborhoods of our city. They saved every single dollar so I could go to a top-tier university without drowning in student debt. They gave me everything. They taught me the value of hard work and absolute loyalty. Then I met Preston. Preston was born into a world of pure privilege. His family owned a massive commercial real estate firm in downtown Chicago. When Preston looked at me, I thought he saw my drive. I thought he respected my ambition. I was completely wrong. He just liked the idea of a self-made woman. It made him feel grounded. It made him feel superior. His mother, Victoria, was a nightmare hidden behind expensive perfume. Victoria wore diamonds to casual Sunday brunches. The first time I met her, she looked at my simple shoes and asked if I was the new intern. For 3 years, I endured her subtle poison. She made sharp comments about my background. She suggested etiquette classes. I swallowed my pride. I kept my mouth shut because I loved Preston. I believed him when he said his mother was just traditional. I sacrificed my own comfort to fit into his elite circle. I believed him when he promised we would build our own independent life away from her toxic shadow. That was the biggest lie I ever believed. When we started planning the wedding, Preston insisted his mother handle the guest list and the seating chart. He said it was just a business formality. He said she needed to impress her wealthy friends and corporate investors. I agreed. I let her take total control over the reception layout. I handed that woman a loaded weapon and pointed it directly at my own family. My parents insisted on paying for half of the wedding. It took a massive chunk of their life savings. I begged them not to, but my father said he wanted to walk his daughter down the aisle with pride. He bought a beautiful new suit. My mother spent weeks finding the perfect dress. They were so incredibly happy. Our wedding reception was held at the Grand Sterling Plaza. The ballroom looked like a royal palace. Thousands of white roses hung from the ceiling. Crystal chandeliers cast a golden glow over 200 wealthy guests. I walked in wearing a dress that cost more than my parents made in a year. For a brief moment, I felt like I had won in life. Then I looked for my parents. The head table was magnificent. Preston and I were placed in the absolute center. Surrounding us were Victoria Preston's father, 3 state politicians, and a billionaire investor named Arthur Vance. Arthur Vance was the man holding the key to a massive corporate merger for Preston's family business. The entire night was a theatrical stage set up just for him. I scanned the tables closest to the front. My parents were not there. I looked at the middle section. Not there either. Panic started to rise in my chest. I found them at the very back of the room. They were seated at a tiny cramped table pushed right against the swinging metal doors of the kitchen. Every time a waiter rushed out, the heavy wooden door slammed into the back of my father's chair. The foul smell of garbage and dirty dishwater drifted over their dinner plates. There were only 4 chairs at that table. My mother, my father, my younger sister, and an empty seat. They were completely isolated, hidden away like a dirty secret. My father was sitting perfectly straight, trying to look dignified, while waiters pushed roughly past him. My mother kept staring down at her white napkin. Her hands were shaking violently. I felt the blood drain from my face. I walked straight over to Victoria. She was sipping champagne with a group of wealthy wives. I kept my voice dangerously low. I asked her why my family was sitting in the service hallway. Victoria smiled. It was a cold, reptilian smile. She did not even lower her voice. She said, "We have high-profile investors here tonight, Maya. We cannot have people with your parents' background embarrassing us. They do not belong in the center of the room." I stopped breathing. I turned to look at Preston. He was standing right behind his mother. He had heard every single word. I waited for him to defend me. I waited for the man I was about to spend my life with to tear his mother apart. Preston looked at me, sighed heavily, and checked his expensive watch. He said, "Let it go, Maya. It is just a table. Do not cause a scene and ruin this night for my family." Right then, the grand illusion shattered completely. I did not see my husband anymore. I saw a pathetic coward. I saw a man who viewed my family as trash. The sadness evaporated instantly. It was replaced by a rage so deep, so pure, it felt like absolute ice in my veins. I did not cry. I did not scream. I walked away from Preston and marched straight to the audio control desk. The disc jockey was adjusting the volume for the background dinner music. I leaned over the table, looked him dead in the eyes, and told him to cut the music and hand me the microphone. He hesitated, but he saw the dark look on my face. The music died instantly. A heavy, suffocating silence fell over the massive ballroom. 200 guests stopped eating. Forks clinked loudly against porcelain plates. Every eye turned to me. I stood in the exact center of the dance floor. I spoke perfectly clearly into the microphone. I said, "Thank you all for being here tonight. This room is filled with powerful people, politicians, executives, and billionaire investors. We are talking a lot about wealth tonight. We are talking a lot about prestige. But before we eat, I need to introduce you to the true, most important guests of this evening." I walked slowly down the center aisle, away from the head table, straight toward the dirty kitchen doors. People twisted in their expensive seats. Preston's face turned completely pale. Victoria gripped her champagne glass so hard, I thought it would shatter in her hand. I stopped right next to my parents. My mother looked terrified. My father stood up, trying to protect me. I held the microphone close. I said, "These are my parents, Daniel and Maria." My father worked 16 hours a day, breathing in toxic exhaust fumes, so I could have a future. My mother scrubbed the floors of mansions, just like the ones many of you live in. They paid for my education. They paid for half of this massive wedding. And tonight, my new family decided they were too uneducated, too poor, and too embarrassing to sit in the main room. A collective, massive gasp echoed through the ballroom. Complete stunned silence followed. I did not stop. I looked right at Victoria. I said my new mother-in-law explicitly placed them next to the garbage disposal so they would not offend the billionaires in the room. But my parents taught me that true loyalty and respect cannot be bought. They are not embarrassing. The people who hide them in the shadows are the embarrassing ones. I looked at a table in the dead center of the room. It was filled with Preston's junior executives. I asked them politely to stand up and switch tables with my family. Nobody moved for 2 heavy seconds. Then a junior manager named David stood up. He grabbed his coat. He looked at Preston with pure disgust. David said, "Absolutely, ma'am." Within 60 seconds, that entire table evacuated to the back. I seated my parents in the exact center of the room, directly in the line of sight of the head table. I looked at Preston. I looked at Victoria. I said, "Enjoy your dinner." I dropped the microphone on the hard floor. The heavy thud echoed through the speakers like a gunshot. The rest of the reception felt like a funeral. People whispered constantly. Nobody danced. Several high-profile guests bypassed the head table completely and went straight to the center of the room to shake my father's rough hand. But the real fatal damage was happening in the shadows. The billionaire investor, Arthur Vance, had watched the entire thing. He did not say a single word. He just stood up, threw his linen napkin on his untouched plate, and walked straight out the front doors. When we got back to the bridal suite at the luxury hotel, the explosion finally happened. Preston slammed the heavy door. He was shaking with blind rage. He screamed that I had destroyed his mother's reputation forever. He screamed that Arthur Vance left early and was refusing to answer his father's frantic phone calls. He looked at me and demanded that I fix it immediately. He told me to get on social media right then and post a public apology video. He drafted a fake statement for me. It said I was overly emotional, that it was a huge misunderstanding, and that Victoria was a saint. He shoved his phone violently into my hand. He said, "Post this right now or we are done." I looked at the glowing screen. Then, I looked at the pathetic man I married just 6 hours ago. I said we are already done. I did not post his fake apology. I opened my own phone. During the reception, a bridesmaid had sent me a video recording. Someone had recorded my entire speech. They recorded me pointing out my parents near the kitchen. They recorded the exact moment Victoria's face turned white with pure guilt. I opened the internet. I did not just post the raw video. I tagged Preston's real estate company. I tagged their biggest corporate sponsors and investors. I wrote a single devastating caption. I wrote, "This company builds luxury homes, but they treat working-class families like literal garbage. This is their true corporate culture." I hit publish. Then I packed my bags, walked out of the bridal suite, and left Preston standing entirely alone in the dark. By the time the sun came up, the video had 5 million views. It was everywhere. The internet absolutely loves tearing down arrogant billionaires, and I handed them the perfect villain on a silver platter. People were furious. The corporate fallout was absolute slaughter. By noon, former employees of Preston's company started commenting on the viral video. They shared dark stories of Victoria's discrimination, unpaid wages, and toxic workplace abuse. A massive national news outlet picked up the story by mid-afternoon. The public pressure was intense. At exactly 2 p.m, Arthur Vance released a public statement. He announced he was officially pulling his $50 million merger with Preston's family. He stated his firm does not align with leadership that lacks basic human decency and respect. Without that specific merger, Preston's company could not cover their massive debts. Their stock tanked by 30% in 48 hours. The board of directors held an emergency panic meeting. They forced Victoria to resign from the company immediately to save their sinking public image. Preston was permanently demoted. Their entire empire of glass and greed cracked right down the middle. 3 weeks later, the divorce papers were officially signed. Preston did not even try to fight me in court. He was too busy dealing with federal auditors looking into his mother's shady financial records, sparked by the viral internet outrage. I moved into a beautiful modern apartment in the city. I started my own independent consulting business. I breathed clean, fresh air for the first time in 3 long years. But the absolute best part did not happen to me. It happened to my father. A month after the disastrous wedding, a massive flatbed truck pulled up to my parents' small house. On the back of the truck was a 1969 Shelby Mustang. It was rusted and broken. The truck driver handed my father a thick envelope. Inside was a massive check and a handwritten letter. It was from Arthur Vance, the billionaire investor. The letter said, "I prefer to do business with men who know how to build things from the ground up. I hear you are the best mechanic in this state. Name your price." Victoria thought she could hide my family in the back near the trash. She forgot one very important detail about the world. When you push strong people into the dark, you teach them exactly how to survive there. And when they finally step out into the light, they bring the absolute fire with them.